Hello, everyone. Will MD here with Young Guns, and I'm here with Ty Guy to talk about the Army Navy game. Jeff, what makes this game special from the other rivalries, such as Michigan, Ohio State, Auburn, Alabama, and Notre Dame, USC?
Well, people always laugh at me because I'm a Bama fan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I mean, we got rivalries. We got Auburn, we got Tennessee, and honestly, playing in a national championship, that is great. But I tell everybody, and they always laugh that the greatest game every year, no matter what, is Army versus Navy.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time that game, their Army plays Navy and Air Force. All three of them play each other, and they play for what's known as the Commander in Chief Trophy. Unfortunately, this year, Air Force has beaten both Navy and Army, so they won the Commander in Chief Trophy. But what makes this game great is everybody has a family member who's been to war. Whether they were in the Army during World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam, or in the Navy, somebody has, family members who've served. And so, you look at that as pride. And for people who have served, it's just a pride thing. We want to beat Army more than anything. Army wants to beat us. It's like the big rivalry game because when you get that win, you have 365 days to hold it over the other team's head. And the thing that makes this so great is 25% of the players playing in the game Saturday are going to retire or are going to graduate in May. Mm-hmm. And probably 10% of those will probably end up in war in the next 4 years. And so some of them will not come back. And so, this is a great game and we love football. And so do they. But to them, this is just a game. They didn't sign up to play football, to go to the NFL. They didn't have the dreams, They're going to graduate in May and they're going to fulfill their commitment to serve in their country. And so to me, that's what makes it, so great because so many people have played in this game and unfortunately lost their lives really soon. So to me, if you've never watched this game, watch it. And I mean, think about your family. Maybe like I said, your dad, your grandpa, he was in the Army. So you know what? Cheer for the Army. Show your support. And, I have mixed feelings about the game because my father was in Vietnam. So he was Army, so this is the game I get to tease my dad every year being a jarhead, we're going to win and it makes it fun. Now these two teams play every year and Navy right now leads the series 62, 53, and 7. So they played 122 times. And that's what makes it special. And, it's close. I mean, 62, 53. That shows you, it's not lopsided like a lot. You go to a lot of the rivalry games and it's really not a rivalry. One team usually does better. And this is really like most rivalry games. It doesn't matter if you go into the game 9-3 and the other team's 4-7, guess what? That 4-7 team is going to whoop you, because this is everything for them. And I tell people, tune into the game a little early. They'll show you some of the pageantry. Anybody out there, if you ever get a chance to go to this game, I'm telling you, show up 3 hours early, watch the cadets parade in. At halftime, you're going to see two wonderful things. The first thing is the President of the United States is there. And so normally he will go to Army first and then over to Navy or Navy and then over to Army. And it's based on who has home field advantage. But there's a big parade, him going from one side to the other. The other thing a lot of people don't know about this game is every year, and I think it's 6, it might be 5, but Army and Navy exchange prisoners. So for 1 year, they send 5 or 6 cadets from Navy to Army, and then Army sends to Navy. And then at halftime of this game, they will exchange the prisoners, which is really cool. And it gives the cadets get to go back. They get a report to, this is what Army does. And it gives you a little idea and an understanding for the other side. Both of the academies are very similar structure wise. I mean, it's a military. So, I mean, obviously it's going to be very similar. And it's just kind of cool. How would you like to be a prisoner for 1 year, Will, if you went to Notre Dame and you got to go to USC or I mean, I couldn't imagine going to Alabama and having to go to Auburn for 1 year. I mean, that to me would be really, really weird. And then the other cool thing about the game is when the game's over, don't shut the TV off, because the losing team is going over to their band and they're going to sing their song. And usually what it is like, let's say Navy loses. Navy will stand up front and Army will stand behind them and kind of support them, and they'll sing their song. And as soon as that song's over, everybody runs to the other side of the field, and then the winning team gets to sing last. And, so you get to hear the fight song. And you think about all the pride that goes in with that. I mean, it's really a big game. It's really, it's sad in a way when you think about it, for a lot of those kids. You being Notre Dame, you think half of your kids aren't going to the pros, but then they're going to be going on to big jobs, making big money. And, let's be honest, these guys are in the military. They're not making big money after college for the first 4 years. They're going to support the United States, which, is really, really great. There's been some really big games. Navy's had the biggest win. We won 51-0 in 1973. That's the largest margin of victory. Everybody out there should know Roger Staubach. He was for Navy. And a lot of times from like the 40s through, well, actually even before the 40s, Army and Navy were great teams back before the 60s, because they got a lot of the players and they got to cheat a little bit, because they had a few people go to war before they were completely finished with, doing their cadet time. So they came back and they got to play a little bit older than, 24. A lot of the games were played at Penn Field, and that is known as the oldest stadium, the oldest college football stadium still in existence. And in its heyday, it was like Jerry World. I mean, when it was first done, I mean, it was big. It held, I believe it was 70,000 at the time. And you got to think, this is back in the 19 teens. So, I mean, this was before, the big house, before, all the monster stadium sprang. This is where everybody wanted to play. This is, the big boy. And Army and Navy played there for years. Unfortunately, today it kind of moves around to NFL stadiums, just for the simple fact, Army and Navy are not big stadiums. You're gonna, and I haven't looked at Army or that, but you're looking at less than 30,000. So for a game like this, you want to get at least 70, 80,000 people. So that's why it's played. And to tell a little bit of the history, in 1944 and 1945, when Army and Navy played each other, both of those years, they were ranked 1 and 2 in the country. So, I mean, you wouldn't think about Army or Navy even being ranked in the top 25 today, but back in the day, they were ranked, and they had teams, that would go to the Cotton Bowl and go, Army beat Texas in the Cotton Bowl. So, I mean, you go back in time and they really did have some really good teams. And like I said, most of the games they try to play in either Philadelphia, New York, they're in Baltimore. So they always try to stay up in the Northeast. Mainly because that's where the schools are, and also it's easier for the president to get in and out of there. And most of the games have come down to the fourth quarter. If you look throughout the history, there's a lot of 6-point games, a lot of 3-point games, not a lot of blowouts. And like I said, they've had some really, the 10 best games, they were all decided, and they all had different little names. I remember the 89 was No Shank from Schnick. He snapped the ball and messed it up, and so they said that he shanked it. There was the 71 game. It was a 22-20 game. Kurt Heiss made the longest field goal in the history of the Army-Navy game, and it was a 52-yarder, which I know that don't sound really, really far, but think about it. How many kickers are going to want to serve in the United States military? Most kickers, you don't think of going on to being in the military. They're usually, the smart ones that are going to school to get a good job. And like I said, the big games, most of them happened in the 40s with World War I. And a lot of people also don't know to kind of go this game. If you go back, I tell everybody, go back and look up Winsipedia and see how many times your team has played Army and Navy. And when you're looking at that up, also go down to the bottom where it says FBS and look at some of those schools. And you're like, well, who are those schools? Well, you know what? There was a lot of schools back then that had Army, Navy, Air Force were playing our colleges, and they were under, Loyola or, some little battalion that, Notre Dame played a couple, Alabama's played a couple, everybody played a few schools, that were Army and Navy, Army Navy light. They were Army Navy, but they weren't the real academies. What else would you like to know about?
What do you think about Coach Ken and Coach Monken, Jeff Monken, what they're doing? Do you think they're doing a good job with what they got?
Yeah, actually, I think Monken could actually coach somewhere else. I think he's that great of a coach. I really do. I'm trying to think of the guy's name. It escaped me. The Georgia Tech coach, Paul
Johnson.
Yeah, he came from Navy and went there and brought the triple option. But Monken, he knows the triple option, but he's a good coach. And he could go, to me, he would kind of be like a Nick Saban because he can adapt. If you want to do a more, pro offense, he could set that up. If you want to do the RPO, he could set, he is a really great coach. He's not, Paul, he was a triple option, and that's all he was going to coach. And, he had no interest in anything else. And so I could see Monken going to a Power 5 school and fitting right in. I think he could recruit. I think he could coach. He, from like 2000 to 2015, the series was a little lopsided to Navy. Navy's won quite a few, and then all of a sudden he came in and he turned Army around. And, Army, unfortunately, Army has, started winning a few of these games when we kind of got used to winning. And so, yeah, I credit him a lot for that. I don't know. The problem is, though, once you get to Army and Navy as a coach, you're not making millions, okay? You're not going to make the Saban or Fisher or that money. But the pride that comes with that job is so, and winning is so much pride that you kind of forget about the money. A lot of coaches are in it for the money, but those coaches are in it more for the pride. And so, I'm not saying Mungan ain't going to leave if somebody offered him $6 million, $8 million. That's a lot of money. But I think the pride that he gets from coaching there is more rewarding than probably, if you go back 10 years ago when Saban was only making $6 million and most coaches were only making 2 or 3, it wasn't that important to move up like it is today now that coaches are actually making millions.
Do you have any fun stories from being at the Army-Navy games?
Oh, I went in 1993. And I tell you what, the game is it really is magical. I mean, you get in there, you sit down, you watch the pageantry. Everybody's in their own little cliques. So, you're singing your songs. You're throwing cadences back and forth to each other, making fun of them. And you know what? For 3 hours, you just give the other team crap. And then when it's over, you know what? We all go have a beer together, congratulate each other. And then, like I say, we brag about it for a year. Now, I will tell you a funny little story. This was in 2004. I lived next to a National Guard base. And 3 of my friends were Army National Guard. And so the night before the game, I had a buddy of mine come over and we bought 25 gallons of blue paint and we bought a paint sprayer. And it had just snowed. And so we snuck onto the base with my paint sprayer and went to my 3 buddies' yards. And in their yard, we wrote, "Go Navy, beat Army." And the commandant of that base did not find the humor in that at all. My buddies, they knew right away who did it. Luckily, they didn't rat me out, but the commander called them up and made them go up outside and shovel their yard. And that's why he did it, because it was snow. So it wasn't permanent, But yeah, they had to go out early in the morning on the Navy Army game and shovel their yard. So that way the rest of the people didn't get to see Go Navy beat Army.
So I took a little gander on Wikipedia as we were having this conversation, and I saw that Army did play Bama in the Sun Bowl.
Yeah.
So who's your dad pulling for that day? Was he pulling for Bama or was he pulling for the Black Knights?
You know what? He pulled for Army. And honestly, I mean, I'm a diehard Bama fan, but if Navy ever played Bama in a bowl and they beat us, I would be happy for them. I mean, because they're not supposed to, they're kind of that little, they're like Vanderbilt, I mean, I hate the SEC, but I kind of root for Vandy because, and like I said, I mean, look at all the years Notre Dame just played Navy and thought nothing of it. And then a few years ago, Navy upset them. And you're just not used to it. And so you think, how big that game was. I mean, I remember my buddies calling me, "Can you believe we beat Notre Dame?" And it's like, you just can't believe that because for most of my life, it never happened. We just naturally assumed. And like this year, Notre Dame only beat us by 3. It was a close game. It was a tight game. And, I commend Notre Dame for playing Navy because, like I said, a lot of people don't realize this. You don't want to play Navy. Because Navy's going to cut you. And you know what? Your lineman gets dinged up from being, you're not used to blocking like that. And you're not used to, so for them to scrap everything they do for 1 week to get ready to play a Navy team who's going to run this offense, it takes a lot of credit for Navy to want to do that. I mean, because people don't understand how many people get nicked up because of that game. And really, what does Notre Dame? You really don't get nothing out of that game.
Yeah.
Because when you win, you're supposed to. But when you lose, you know what I mean? It's a big deal. And, it don't look good.
Yeah, it does not look good. So, yeah, also, I'm always afraid the week after we play Navy because they cut us up. And then, if we're playing someone decent that next week, I'm scared. But this year we played backup college and we beat them good. So That
Well,
didn't
and
cost us
that's the
this
thing you
year.
don't understand. Your linemen, they're hitting their
Hmm.
knees and they're, all day long. So you're dinged up. And it takes you 7 to 14 days to get back into, and plus, let's face it, it's not fun when you're a 300-pound lineman and the guy across from you is only 240 pounds, but he keeps cutting your legs. It is
Hmm.
frustrating.
Oh yeah. Also, 2014, Ohio State's lost to Virginia Tech. They played Navy the week before. They got cut up, and then they couldn't get it. They couldn't pull through the next week against a pretty marginal Virginia Tech team that year. So it really is more
Yeah,
than just the
everybody
odds.
says playing Alabama, most teams used to lose twice because you'd lose
Hmm.
to Alabama and then you'd lose the next week because you're beat up. And that's kind of how
Hmm.
it is with Navy. You don't want to play USC the week after you played Navy after they
Hmm.
chopped your legs for 60 minutes. And I do understand why you guys don't play Navy and Army
Hmm.
both, because that'd be a lot in a year. I mean, you
Hmm.
go play the triple option and then play a couple more games and come back to that's just not an easy schedule whatsoever.
Hmm. All right, Jeff. Do you have any final thoughts about the game this week? What you're looking forward to? How do you think the game's going to go?
This week, Army has more wins than Navy.
Hmm.
I really think this game is going to come down to a field goal. I think whoever has the ball last. Um, the one thing me and my buddies always bet on is the over under in passes. And I think this week our Navy is the over under is 3 passes. Will they throw the ball more than 3 times? Because I mean, we don't throw the ball. Historically we don't. We're likely to throw the ball, a couple times a game. And especially with Army, we don't throw the ball a lot. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that's the other reason why this game is historically really close, because both of our defenses practice all year long against the triple option, So, I mean, they're used to playing every week in practice against it. So it is kind of hard to run up the score when the other team is just as good at doing what you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I have a gut feeling I might put a little bit on Navy. I mean, I don't have that much money now, but if I were to bet, I would probably bet on Navy just because I feel like the underdog always plays with a bit of their chip on their shoulder and ends up winning the game.
Yeah, yeah. The underdog usually does well. And the other thing is, this game is going to be kind of like an Iowa Hawkeye game. I don't know
Hmm.
if it's going to be under, because historically, it's usually a race to 17. If you
Hmm.
can score 17 before the other team, you pretty much win this game more times than not. I mean, I don't know what the history is, and I'm going to do this now tomorrow. I'm going to look it up, but I bet more games than not have been won by scoring 17 or fewer.
Hmm.
There's just not a lot of scoring in this game.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Jeff. I'm sure it's going to be a great game, and it's the same time as France and England, so I will be switching back to the soccer after the commercials, but I definitely will do my best to try to pay more attention to Army Navy. It should be awesome this
Well,
week.
and we're going to do it live on my channel. So if you get a
Awesome.
chance, come on in.
Oh yeah.
Because as you know, with the knuckleheads and that, we got 4 Army. I'm the only Marine, but I got my buddy Sergeant Pickles who's going to come in and watch a little bit of the game. But all your supporters out there, watch the game Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
and before the game, stop and think, and if you're young and you don't know, ask your dad, ask your
Mm-hmm.
mom, hey, who in our family has served in the military? You'd really be
Mm-hmm.
surprised, because truly very few families can say they've never had somebody in, between all the world wars, or Korea, Vietnam, or
Mm-hmm.
even today in the Gulf, I mean, so, pick a side, cheer for a side. It's a great day. It's a great
Mm-hmm.
time. And there's really, once you watch the game, you'll understand there's really nothing truly like it. I mean, I know, Michigan, Ohio State's huge, Bama, Auburn, Notre Dame, USC. Those are all great games, and we like to, but nothing is like this. I mean, this is young men who've made a commitment to their country, and these are kids who signed on a dotted line who are willing to die for that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't see Bryce Young saying, okay, I'm going to sign up for Alabama and there's a chance I'm going to go to war and die for Alabama. That don't happen. Only the Army, Navy, Air Force, those guys put their name on a dotted line knowing, at some time they could go to war. So that's really what makes it special.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeff. And it's going to be a great game this week.
All right. Thanks for having me.